The rich CEO walked into his office and found a crying girl. Seconds later, he was in shock. Michael Carter had started his Monday morning the same way he always did. Tight schedule, a dozen meetings ahead, and $100 million worth of deals pending. But none of that mattered when he saw Sophie Miller sitting in the corner of his sleek, glass-walled office. Tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands shaking as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Michael froze in the doorway. Sophie wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't on the staff, wasn't on his calendar, and as far as he knew, he had never seen her before in his life. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm but not unkind. Sophie looked up, eyes red, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, I didn't know where else to go." Michael took a step forward, the air between them charged with unanswered questions. His assistant, Claire, appeared in the doorway, panicked. "Sir, I tried to stop her, but she just—" Michael raised a hand to silence her. Something in Sophie's eyes made him pause. They weren't the eyes of someone here to cause trouble. They were the eyes of someone drowning, someone holding on to their last shred of hope. "Close the door," Michael ordered quietly. Claire hesitated, then shut the door, leaving them alone. Sophie clutched a worn leather folder to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. "Please," she whispered. "You don't know me, but you know my father." Michael's mind raced. He had met thousands of people in his career. "Who's your father?" Sophie's lip quivered before she answered. "Daniel Miller, he worked for Carter Industries 15 years ago." Michael blinked, the name hitting him like a distant echo. Daniel Miller, a loyal employee, a man who years ago had left suddenly under strange circumstances. Circumstances Michael never fully understood. "Your father," Michael began slowly. "He was one of the best engineers we ever had." Sophie's voice broke. "He's dead, Mr. Carter. And I think it's because of something that happened here." Michael felt the room shift. In his world of billion-dollar contracts, nothing rattled him, except the past. He pulled out a chair. Start from the beginning." Sophie hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were letters, old company memos, and a photograph of Daniel with a young Sophie on his shoulders, smiling in a way that made Michael's chest tighten. "My father never talked about work after he left," Sophie began, her voice soft but laced with pain. "But the night before he died, he told me there was something in this company. Something he couldn't carry anymore." Michael leaned forward. "And you think I know what that is?" Sophie wiped her tears, her gaze steady now. "I think you're the only one who can help me find out." The CEO who commanded boardrooms without blinking felt something stir inside him. A mix of responsibility, guilt, and an unfamiliar sense of protectiveness toward the young woman in front of him. He knew this wasn't just a coincidence. Something was buried in Carter Industries' history, and Sophie Miller had just cracked open a door he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through. But there was no turning back now. And if you're watching this right now, you need to stick with this story. Because what Michael was about to discover would change everything. And if you don't want to miss the truth when it finally comes out, hit that subscribe button right now. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. Cool. Michael Carter sat back in his chair, eyes locked on Sophie Miller as the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. "Something he couldn't carry anymore," she had said. In the corporate world, that phrase could mean a bad investment, a ruined reputation, or a secret worth killing for. Michael reached for the folder she still held, but Sophie pulled it slightly back. "You'll read it. But not here. Too many eyes, too many ears." Michael frowned. "You think my office isn't secure?" Sophie's gaze didn't waver. "I think whoever was involved back then still works here." That made him pause. Carter Industries had over 6,000 employees worldwide. But the inner circle, the one Daniel Miller would have been part of, was less than 20 people. If Sophie was right, someone in that small, trusted group had destroyed her father's life. Michael leaned forward. "Why come to me now?" Sophie took a deep breath. "Because last week, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't take money, jewelry, or anything valuable, just a box of my father's old files. The only reason I still have these is because I'd hidden them at my friend's place." Michael's pulse quickened. This wasn't random. And you think it's connected to his death? She nodded. I know it is. Michael reached for the intercom. Claire. Cancel my morning meetings. Claire's voice came through, confused. Sir, you have the Zurich investors. Chancel. All of them. He turned back to Sophie. If we're doing this, we do it my way. And that means starting with the last day your father worked here. Sophie's hands trembled slightly as she slid the folder across the desk. Then you should see this first. Inside were photocopies of internal memos dated March 17, 15 years ago. The day Daniel Miller had resigned. One memo in particular caught Michael's attention. It was marked confidential and addressed to a single name, H. Graves. Michael's stomach tightened. Henry Graves had been his father's right-hand man, a senior executive with unmatched influence. But Henry had retired abruptly just a year after Daniel's departure, disappearing from the corporate world entirely. Michael tapped the memo. Do you know who this is? Sophie shook her head. No. But I think he's the one my father was afraid of. Michael closed the folder and stood. We're going to the archives. Sophie followed him through the maze of hallways, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. The archives were in the oldest part of the building, a place most employees didn't even know existed. When they reached the secured steel door, Michael swiped his keycard, the lock clicking open with a low hum. The air inside was cold, the scent of dust and history filling the space. Rows upon rows of metal cabinets stretched out before them, each drawer labeled with years and departments. Michael headed straight for 2009, the year of Daniel's resignation. Sophie trailed close behind, scanning every label as they moved. Halfway down the third row, Michael stopped and opened a drawer. Inside were files sealed with company stamps, their edges yellowed with age. He found Daniel's personnel file quickly. But the contents were thinner than they should have been. Half of it's missing, he muttered. Sophie looked over his shoulder. What do you mean? Michael held up the file. Performance reports, project records all gone. Someone's been here before us. Before he could say more, the sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance of the archive room. Michael closed the drawer quietly and motioned Sophie to stay still. A shadow appeared at the far end of the aisle, tall, deliberate, and moving slowly. Michael's mind raced. Very few people had clearance to this room. The figure stopped, clearly aware they weren't alone. Then, a voice, deep, calm, and chillingly familiar, drifted across the space. Michael Carter. Still digging in places you shouldn't. Sophie's grip on his arm tightened. Michael turned toward the voice, and his heart skipped a beat. Standing in the dim light was a man he hadn't seen in over a decade. Henry Graves. Two Henry Graves stepped forward. The faint shuffle of his expensive leather shoes echoing in the cold, silent archive room. Time had aged him. Hair silver. Face lined. But his presence was exactly as Michael remembered, calm, calculating, and unnervingly confident. Henry. Michael said evenly, masking the jolt of surprise in his chest. I thought you retired. Henry's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. Retired? No. Michael, men like me don't retire. We simply move to the shadows where the real work is done. His gaze slid to Sophie, who stiffened under his stare. And who is this? Henry asked, voice smooth but laced with something colder. Michael stepped slightly in front of her. She's not your concern. Henry chuckled softly. If she's in this room, she's my concern. Sophie's hands clenched at her sides. You knew my father. Daniel Miller. For the briefest moment, Henry's eyes flickered with recognition. And something darker. Before his expression settled back into a mask. Daniel, yes. A bright mind. A shame he couldn't adapt. Sophie's voice rose. He didn't quit. You pushed him out. Henry's smile deepened. But there was no warmth in it. And what exactly do you think you'll prove, Miss Miller? That the past can be rewritten. Michael's instincts screamed danger. Henry wasn't here by chance. He'd been watching, waiting for this very moment. You have no clearance to be in this building, Michael said firmly. Henry stepped closer, lowering his voice. Clearance is a piece of plastic, Michael. Influence is everything. You do well to remember that before you drag your family name into places it doesn't belong. Sophie took a step forward. Despite Michael's hand tightening on her arm. My father kept records. Things you didn't want anyone to see. And I'm going to find them. Henry's eyes narrowed, the first crack in his polished demeanor. Careful, girl. You think you're chasing justice, but all you'll find is ruin. Michael moved toward him. Get out, Henry. Now. Henry's gaze lingered on Michael for a moment longer, then on Sophie, as if committing her face to memory. Finally, he turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps unhurried, each one echoing like a warning. The heavy door shut behind him with a metallic thud, leaving the air colder than before. Sophie exhaled shakily. He knows, she whispered. Michael nodded grimly. And if Henry Graves is back in play, this isn't just about your father anymore. Whatever happened 15 years ago, it's bigger than both of us. He opened the drawer again, scanning the remaining files. Then, tucked in the back corner, he found a slim, unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph, Daniel Miller standing beside a massive prototype engine, and Henry Graves, smiling like a man who had just won the world. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were 4 words. They can't know yet. Michael closed the envelope and met Sophie's eyes. We need to leave. Now. Before Henry decides to finish what he started. Michael didn't waste time. The moment they stepped out of the archive room, he guided Sophie down a service hallway, rarely used by anyone but security. We're not going back to my office, he said in a low voice. If Henry knows you're here, he knows more than he should. And I'm not giving him a second chance to intercept us. Sophie kept pace beside him, clutching the envelope with the photograph like it was a lifeline. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere he can't reach us. Michael replied. He led her to a private elevator tucked behind a maintenance door, swiping a keycard that most employees didn't even know existed. 10 minutes later, they were in the underground parking garage, the concrete walls closing them off from the rest of the city. Michael unlocked a black SUV and motioned for her to get in. As soon as they were on the road, he turned off his phone, then reached over and powered down hers as well. From now on, nothing digital. No texts, no calls. If Henry has the kind of reach I think he does, he's watching more than just the company's files. Sophie nodded, tension in her shoulders. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city skyline behind. Michael eventually pulled into a narrow gravel driveway, leading to an old warehouse on the edge of an industrial district. The place looked abandoned. Rusted metal siding, boarded up windows. But when Michael unlocked the side door and stepped inside, Sophie saw it was anything but deserted. The interior was clean with rows of locked cabinets, workbenches, and several covered objects that looked like machinery under heavy tarps. What is this place? She asked. Michael locked the door behind them. My father built this as a backup operations site in the 80s, in case the company ever faced sabotage. No one outside my family knows about it. He set the envelope on a steel table, sliding the photograph out again. The prototype engine in the picture was massive, industrial, complex, unlike anything Sophie had seen. That's not a car engine, she said. Michael shook his head. No. It's aerospace. If this is what I think it is, your father wasn't just working on company property. He was working on something that could have changed the industry. Sophie leaned in, tracing the photo with her eyes. Then why hide it? Michael's expression hardened. Because anything that changes an industry also threatens the people who profit from keeping things the way they are. Henry Graves wasn't just an executive. He was a gatekeeper. Michael opened one of the cabinets and pulled out a metal box with a biometric lock. I had my own reasons for keeping certain files out of the company system. If your father left any trace, it might be here. He scanned his fingerprint, and the lock clicked open. Inside were stacks of folders, flash drives, and a single sealed package marked Mail or Confidentiel. Sophie's breath caught. That's his handwriting. Michael placed the package on the table and cut the seal. Inside was a set of blueprints. The same engine from the photograph, but annotated in Daniel Miller's precise handwriting. Along the margins were numbers, equations, and something that made Michael's stomach twist. Dates. The last date written was the same day Daniel resigned. Next to it, in bold, underlined ink, were the words, "They will come for this." Sophie's hands shook. This is why they ruined him. Michael nodded grimly. And if Henry's resurfaced, it means this engine isn't just history. Someone's trying to finish it without your father. He carefully sealed the blueprints. We need to find out who's funding it, and why now. But the moment we start asking questions, we'll be in their sights. A noise broke through the stillness. Faint, metallic, from somewhere near the front of the warehouse. Sophie froze. Michael motioned for silence and moved toward the sound, every step deliberate. Through a narrow gap in the boarded window, he saw it. A black sedan idling on the street, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. The driver's side window rolled down just enough for the glint of a camera lens to appear. Michael turned back to Sophie, voice low but urgent. Pack the files. We're leaving now. Michael moved fast, scooping the blueprints, photograph, and Daniel's folder into a duffel bag, while keeping his eyes on the front door. The black sedan outside hadn't moved, but the camera was still pointed toward the warehouse. Sophie shoved the remaining documents into the bag. Her breath quick and shallow. Who are they? She whispered. Not sure yet, Michael said, but if Henry sent them, we're already out of time. He slung the bag over his shoulder, took Sophie by the wrist, and led her toward a side exit. The warehouse's back door opened into a narrow alley lined with rusted dumpsters and chain-link fences. Michael paused, scanning the street beyond. It looked clear. Stay close, he murmured. They crossed the alley quickly, but halfway down, the low growl of an engine rumbled behind them. Sophie glanced back. The black sedan had pulled around the corner, its headlights sweeping the walls. Run, Michael ordered. They bolted across the street, weaving between parked trucks and stacks of shipping crates. The sedan followed, slow but deliberate, like a predator pacing its prey. Michael yanked open the door to a side building, an abandoned loading dock, and pulled Sophie inside. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind them, plunging them into shadows. They moved through the dark space, the sound of their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Somewhere outside, the sedan's door slammed. Multiple footsteps approached. Sophie's heart pounded in her ears. Michael stopped beside a row of dusty wooden pallets and whispered, "Hide here. No matter what happens, don't make a sound." Sophie crouched behind the pallets, clutching the duffel bag, while Michael slipped into the shadows near the entrance. The loading dock door creaked open. Two men stepped inside, both tall, wearing dark jackets, their movements sharp and practiced. One carried a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. "They came through here," one said. The other scanned the floor, spotting faint shoe prints in the dust. "Split up. Check every corner." Michael stayed still, calculating. He could take one of them by surprise, but the other would still be armed. He couldn't risk Sophie's life. The man with the flashlight moved toward her hiding spot. Sophie's grip on the duffel tightened. Her mind screamed to run, but she forced herself to stay frozen, even as the beam of light swept dangerously close. Then, from outside, a loud crash, shattering glass and the screech of tires. Both men froze. "Go," one barked, and they ran back toward the street. Michael waited a beat, then grabbed Sophie's hand. "Now." They slipped out a side door into a narrow passageway that led to an old stairwell. "What was that noise?" Sophie asked breathlessly as they climbed. "I don't know," Michael said. "But we're using it." At the top of the stairwell, they emerged onto a rooftop. The city stretched out in the distance, the industrial district below them like a maze of steel and shadows. Michael scanned the streets. The black sedan was gone. For now, he turned to Sophie. "We can't go back to my place and you can't go home. From this moment on, we're ghosts. If they can't find us, they can't kill us." Sophie swallowed hard. "And if they do?" Michael's gaze was steady. "Then we make sure they regret it." The rooftop air was sharp and cold, carrying the metallic scent of the industrial district. Michael scanned the horizon, then pointed toward a cluster of low buildings several blocks away. "We're going there?" he said. Sophie followed his gaze. "What's there?" Michael didn't answer immediately. "Someone who owes me a favor. And someone who can find things no one else can." They made their way down through another stairwell, slipping into the dark back streets. The black sedan hadn't returned, but Michael knew that didn't mean they were safe. It meant the hunters had simply switched tactics. He kept Sophie close, moving fast but never drawing attention. After 20 minutes of weaving through side streets, they reached a nondescript brick building with no sign on the door. Michael knocked in a strange rhythm. Too short, one long, too short. A slit in the door opened, revealing a pair of sharp eyes. "Carter," a low voice said. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Michael replied, "Times change, Tony." The heavy door swung open, and they stepped inside. The place was dimly lit. The air thick with the hum of old computers, and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. A man in his late 40s sat at a desk cluttered with cables and monitors. Tony Delgado, Michael's oldest off-the-books contact. He had once been Carter Industries' head of cyber security before leaving under disputed circumstances. Now, he was a ghost in the digital world, trading information for favors and cash. Tony leaned back in his chair eyeing Sophie. "You bring the girl for a reason. Or is this some midlife crisis rescue mission?" Michael's voice was flat. "She's Daniel Miller's daughter." Tony's eyebrows lifted. "No, that's a name I haven't heard in years." Sophie spoke up. "My father was forced out of the company. And I think he was killed because of what he knew." Tony's gaze sharpened. "What he knew about?" Michael set the blueprints on the desk. "This." Tony whistled low. "Haven't seen this project in over a decade. It was buried deep." He flipped through the pages, his fingers brushing over the annotations. "These designs, if finished, they'd cut operational costs in half for certain aerospace applications. Billions in lost profits for the wrong people." He glanced at Michael. "And you're telling me Henry Graves is sniffing around again?" Michael nodded. Tony swiveled to one of his computers, typing fast. "If Henry's back, he's not acting alone. Let's see who's moving money where they shouldn't be." Lines of code and financial data flashed across the monitors. Sophie stood silently, watching as Tony peeled back layers of encrypted accounts. "There," he said after a few minutes, pointing at the screen. "3 shell corporations funneling millions into a private lab in Nevada. Guess whose name's attached to the oversight board?" Michael leaned in, and froze. Richard Carter. His uncle. The man who had mentored him after his father's death. The man he trusted more than almost anyone. Sophie's eyes widened. "He's family." Michael didn't answer right away. His mind was already racing. "If Richard's involved, this goes deeper than we thought." Tony turned in his chair. "Michael, you need to understand something. If your uncle's funding this, it's not just about money. It's about control. And anyone who gets in his way." He let the sentence hang. Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. "So what now?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Now we go to Nevada. And we find out exactly what they're building." They left the city under the cover of night, traveling in a borrowed SUV with no plates, courtesy of Tony. The roads grew emptier as they crossed into Nevada, the bright city lights giving way to the endless black of the desert. Sophie sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands wrapped around the duffel bag, as if letting it out of her sight, for even a moment might erase the truth they'd uncovered. Michael kept his eyes on the highway, mind replaying the name Tony had found. Richard Carter. His uncle. A man who had always been a figure of strength in his life. The idea of him being at the center of this was a crack in the foundation of everything Michael believed about his family. They arrived near dawn, pulling off the main road onto a narrow, unmarked dirt path. The GPS showed nothing here, but Michael trusted Tony's intel. After half a mile, the faint outline of a building emerged from the desert haze. Squat, windowless, surrounded by high fencing topped with barbed wire. Security cameras tracked slowly across the perimeter, and 2 guards in black uniforms patrolled with military precision. Michael parked the SUV in a dry riverbed a quarter-mile away. "From here, we walk," he said. Sophie scanned the facility nervously. "How do you even get inside something like that?" Michael pulled a small black case from the glove compartment. Inside was a set of tools, lockpicks, a handheld signal jammer, and a device that looked like a simple phone but was far from it. "Quietly," he said. They approached low to the ground, using the scrub and rocky terrain for cover. Michael watched the guards' patterns, until he saw the opening he needed. A 30-second gap on the north side, where the cameras turned away, and the patrolling guards' lines of sight overlap. "Now," he whispered. They slipped to the fence, Michael cutting through the chain link with precision before pulling Sophie through. The jammer crackled softly in his pocket, disrupting the nearest camera feed just long enough for them to slide to the side entrance. Inside, the air was cold, dry, and sterile. The hallway was lined with heavy steel doors, each with a keycard lock. Michael's counterfeit card, another gift from Tony, worked on the third door. They stepped into a massive room lit by harsh fluorescent lights, and Sophie's breath caught. In the center of the room stood the prototype engine from her father's blueprints. But bigger, more advanced, and fully assembled. Technicians in lab coats moved around it, adjusting panels, checking monitors. Above them, on a raised observation deck, stood two men deep in conversation. One was Henry Graves. The other was Richard Carter. Michael felt his jaw tighten as he watched his uncle, calm, commanding, speaking to Henry like an equal. Sophie whispered, "That's him." Michael nodded once. "That's him." They edged along the shadows listening. Richard's voice carried faintly. "The final test is in 48 hours. If it works, we control the market. And no one will remember Daniel Miller." Henry smirked. "They'll only remember who finished it." Sophie's hand balled into a fist. Michael leaned closer. "We need proof. Photographs. Video. Something that ties them to this." But before he could pull out his small camera, a voice shouted from behind them. "Hey! You're not supposed to be here." Two guards rounded the corner, weapons drawn. The shout echoed through the sterile lab hallway, snapping every nerve in Michael's body to full alert. Two guards advanced fast, weapons raised, their boots pounding against the polished floor. Sophie froze for half a second, her grip tightening on the duffel bag. Michael grabbed her arm and yanked her toward the nearest maintenance door. "Move," he hissed. The guards shouted again, one into his radio. "Intruders in the north wing. Lock it down." Sirens blared overhead, bathing the hallway in pulsing red light. They burst into the maintenance room, Michael slamming the door behind them, and throwing the deadbolt. The air inside was thick with the smell of oil and machinery. Sophie's voice was sharp with panic. "What now?" Michael scanned the walls, spotting a grated ventilation shaft. He crossed the room in 3 strides, ripping the cover free. "Now we crawl." Sophie hesitated only a moment before shoving the duffel inside and climbing after it. Michael followed, pulling the grate closed just as the door to the maintenance room rattled violently. The guards outside shouted and began forcing it open. They crawled fast through the narrow, metal tunnel, the sound of boots and muffled voices chasing them through the walls. The shaft split into 2 directions. Michael paused, listening. One path carried the faint hum of exterior air vents, the other deeper into the facility. Left, he decided. Sophie didn't question him, pushing forward until a square of daylight appeared ahead. Michael kicked the final vent free, dropping them into a small loading bay at the back of the building. The area was empty. For now. They sprinted across the concrete toward the fence line. But a voice barked from behind. "Stop." More guards were pouring out of a side door, weapons drawn. Michael grabbed Sophie's hand and yanked her toward a parked delivery truck idling with its back doors open. Without hesitation, he shoved her inside and climbed after her. The driver, a wary man in overalls, turned, startled. "Hey, what the hell?" Michael pressed a $100 bill into his hand. "Drive. Now." The man didn't ask twice. The truck roared forward, rolling out of the loading bay just as 2 black SUVs screeched into view behind them. Bullets cracked against the metal siding. Sophie ducked low, clutching the duffel. Michael yanked the rear door shut and braced himself against it. The chase tore down the narrow desert road, the SUVs gaining fast. Michael glanced at Sophie. "When I say jump, we jump." Her eyes widened. "Jump, are you insane? If we stay, they'll box us in, trust me." He counted the seconds, watching the blur of scrub and sand outside. Then, spotting a sharp bend ahead, he yanked the door open and shouted, "Now!" They leapt into the dust, tumbling hard down the embankment. The truck kept going, the SUVs roaring past after it, unaware their targets were no longer inside. Michael pulled Sophie to her feet, both of them coated in dirt and breathing hard. "We bought ourselves a few minutes," he said, scanning the horizon. "Now we disappear again." Sophie tightened her hold on the duffel. "We got away, but we still don't have proof." Michael's eyes hardened. "We will. But next time, we're not just sneaking in." He looked back toward the distant lab. "We're taking something with us." They made it back to civilization in a stolen pickup they'd found half buried in sand behind an abandoned gas station. The drive was long, silent, and tense. Sophie kept replaying the image of her uncle's cold, commanding presence next to Henry Graves in that observation deck. Every time she thought of Richard Carter saying, "No one will remember Daniel Miller," her chest tightened. When they finally pulled into the dim alley behind Tony Delgado's safe house, it was near midnight. Michael knocked in the same coded rhythm as before. The door cracked open, and Tony's eyes widened at the sight of them. Dusty, bruised, and carrying the duffel like it was nuclear material. "You look like hell," he muttered, ushering them inside. "Please tell me you brought me a souvenir." Michael dropped into a chair. "We saw it, Tony. The prototype's finished. Henry and my uncle are running the operation. The test is in 48 hours. Tony leaned back, whistling low. "That's not much time." Sophie spoke up, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "We can't just watch them finish it, we have to stop it. And we need proof. Something so damning they can't spin their way out of it." Tony swiveled to his computers. "I can get you blueprints of the lab. Guard rotations, even the access codes. But you'll need more than that. You'll need a way to get inside without tripping every alarm they have." Michael's eyes narrowed. "You're thinking inside help?" Tony nodded. "I know someone. Used to work security there before they cut him loose. Knows the layout better than anyone." He typed quickly, pulling up a file on his screen. A name flashed: Evan Rourke. "He's in Reno now. Bit of a freelancer," Tony said. "If you can convince him, he might be your golden ticket in." Sophie leaned forward. "And if we can't?" Tony looked at her flatly. "Then you walk into that place blind. And you don't walk out." Michael stood, already grabbing the keys. "Send me the address. We leave now." Sophie followed him toward the door. "We're really going to try this?" Michael's reply was firm. "We're not trying, Sophie. We're doing." They found Evan Rourke in a dingy bar on the edge of Reno, nursing a glass of whiskey and wearing a faded security jacket. He was in his early 50s, with the wary eyes of a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. Michael slid into the booth across from him. "Rourke. I'm Michael Carter." Evan didn't look impressed. "I know who you are. And I know you're in way over your head." Michael leaned in. "Then you know why we're here." Sophie placed Daniel Miller's photograph on the table. "He was my father. He worked with you. Didn't he?" Evan stared at the photo for a long moment before taking a slow drink. "Yeah, he was a good man. Didn't deserve what happened to him." Michael pressed. "Help us, and we end this. You know the lab, you know their blind spots. We just need a way in and a way out." Evan's eyes shifted between them, weighing something. Finally, he exhaled. "I'll get you in. But if we're doing this, you better be ready for a fight. Because once we start, there's no going back." Michael's gaze was steady. "We've been past the point of no return for days." Hugh Rourke's apartment was a cramped, dimly lit space above a pawn shop. Maps and old security blueprints were pinned to the walls, and the air smelled faintly of dust and gun oil. He motioned Michael and Sophie toward a table already covered in gear. Headsets, night vision goggles, compact rifles, and a handful of devices Michael couldn't identify. "That's the fun part," Rourke said, tapping a black cylinder. "Pulse emitter. Fries electronics in a 20-foot radius. You get 30 seconds of chaos, then everything reboots." Michael nodded, already scanning the blueprints. "Where's the entry point?" Rourke took a red marker and circled a spot on the eastern perimeter. "There's an old underground waste conduit. It was sealed after they upgraded, but the concrete's rotting. We hit it with a thermal saw, we're in. The conduit runs under the main floor and comes up in maintenance storage. No cameras in there." Sophie traced the route with her finger. "And after we're inside," Rourke's tone darkened. "You'll be in their kill box. Guards rotate every 7 minutes. Stick to the shadows. If you're seen, you don't run. You eliminate the threat before they can hit the alarm. Michael didn't like the way Sophie's jaw tightened. But he let it go. They spent the next hours memorizing the schematics, rehearsing their timing. Every detail mattered. A single mistake could end them. When they broke for a moment, Sophie stepped outside to get air. The alley behind the pawn shop was dark, but she wasn't alone. A figure leaned against the wall. Tony, his hands in his pockets. "I came to see if you're still breathing," he said lightly, but his eyes searched hers. "You sure about this, Sophie? You don't come back from something like this the same person." She met his gaze. "They killed my father. They're not walking away." Tony sighed. Then handed her a slim USB drive. "Just in case. Has something you might need, but Michael doesn't need to know you have it yet." Sophie took it, sliding it into her jacket without a word. Back inside, Michael was fitting a small earpiece. "We move at 0200. In and out before sunrise." Rourke handed Sophie a sidearm. She took it without hesitation. Michael noticed the steel in her eyes. A quiet determination he hadn't seen before. The hours crawled toward the operation. Michael sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, thinking about what it would mean to face his uncle inside that lab. Sophie sat across from him, loading her weapon in silence. Rourke checked his watch. Time to go. They loaded the gear into the back of an unmarked van. The city fell away behind them, replaced by the vast emptiness of the desert. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of Rourke's radio. No one spoke. The air was heavy with the unspoken truth. Tomorrow wasn't promised. The van rolled to a silent stop a quarter-mile from the perimeter fence. The night was moonless, the desert stretching in black waves under a cold wind. Rourke killed the headlights and checked his watch. "We've got 30 minutes before the next drone sweep. Move." They grabbed their gear and moved low across the sand, their dark clothing blending into the shadows. The lab security lights glowed faintly in the distance. A quiet fortress in the middle of nowhere. Every step crunched faintly on the grit, and Michael's heartbeat matched the rhythm of his boots. The old waste conduit came into view, a corroded concrete hatch half buried under sand. Rourke knelt, brushing away debris. "Told you it'd still be here." He pulled a thermal saw from his pack, its blade whirring in the dark. Sparks hissed as he cut through the rusted bolts. Michael kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for movement. "We're burning time." Rourke didn't look up. "You want in or not?" Finally, the hatch broke loose with a groan, releasing a stale gust of air. Rourke slid inside first, disappearing into the darkness below. Michael followed, then Sophie. The conduit was narrow, the damp walls streaked with age, forcing them to crouch as they moved. Halfway through, Michael froze. Ahead, a faint red glow pulsed against the wall. Rourke cursed under his breath. "Trip lasers. New. Wasn't here before." Sophie's voice was low. "We can't go back." Rourke pulled a small mirror from his vest, angling it to see the beam's origin. "We can't trip them either." He dug into his kit and pulled out a compact jammer. "This'll scramble the sensor for 90 seconds. After that, it reactivates." Michael took a deep breath. "Then we move fast." Rourke activated the jammer. The red glow flickered out, and they surged forward. Their boots splashed in shallow water as the conduit sloped upward, ending in a rusted service grate. Above them, faint light spilled through. Rourke eased the grate up, but froze. Voices. 2 guards stood in the maintenance room, their rifles slung casually, talking about the next day's big test. Michael's fingers tightened on his weapon. "We can't wait," he whispered. Sophie met his eyes, then nodded once. She moved first, sliding out of the conduit with deadly quiet. Before either guard realized they weren't alone, Sophie's sidearm coughed twice, and both men dropped without a sound. Michael climbed out, staring at her. "You didn't even hesitate." Sophie's voice was flat. "We don't have time for hesitation." Rourke closed the grate behind them. "All right. We're in. Now the hard part starts." The maintenance room smelled of oil and bleach, the hum of machinery vibrating through the walls. Rourke moved first, guiding them through a narrow hallway that branched into the facility's core. Every corner was another risk. Every shadow felt like it might be hiding a rifle barrel. They reached the first checkpoint. A reinforced steel door with a biometric scanner. Rourke knelt beside the panel, pulling out a thin case of tools. This is a palm print and retina combo. Should take me 2 minutes. Michael kept his weapon aimed at the hallway, sweat trailing down his neck. 2 minutes turned into 30 seconds when Sophie stepped forward. Move. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the USB drive Tony had given her. Rourke frowned but plugged it into the scanner's maintenance port. The screen flickered, then went green. ACCESS guaranteed. Michael glanced at her. You want to tell me how you had that? Sophie didn't answer, just pushed past him. Inside, the hallway opened into a cavernous chamber of glass and steel. Rows of sealed labs lined each side, each one lit with a sterile white glow. Inside the nearest lab, a man in a hazmat suit worked over a table, a metal cylinder the size of a suitcase resting in front of him. That's it, Rourke muttered. The prototype. But Michael wasn't looking at the cylinder. His eyes were locked on a wall of monitors at the far end of the chamber. Dozens of live feeds flickered there. Security cameras from inside the building, but also footage from inside homes, offices, even street corners around the city. Some of those faces Michael knew them: employees, competitors, politicians. This isn't just tech theft, Michael said quietly. They're building a surveillance grid, and they're already using it. Before anyone could respond, a voice rang out over the chamber's PA system. Smooth. Controlled chilling. Well, nephew. I wondered when you'd come. Michael's blood ran cold. Every screen in the room went black. Then lit up with a single feed. His uncle Charles Kane, sitting in a darkened office, smiling as if this were a family reunion. You've brought friends. That's unfortunate for them. At that moment, the door behind them slammed shut, locking with a heavy clang. Red lights began to pulse. And a distant alarm started to rise. Rourke swore. We've been made. Sophie tightened her grip on her weapon. Then we finish what we came here for. And get out alive. The alarm's wail echoed through the steel corridors. Red lights pulsing like the heartbeat of the building. On the monitors, Charles Kane leaned forward, his smirk carved in shadow. Michael. You never did understand the weight of power. That device on the table, it could change the world. But you'd throw it all away for your little morals. Michael's jaw tightened. Morals are the only thing that keep the world from becoming yours. Kane's chuckle was low and amused. We'll see about that. He glanced off screen and gave a single nod. The feed cut to black. The hiss of hydraulics filled the room, and 2 reinforced side doors slid open. From each, a squad of armored guards poured in, rifles raised. Their movements were crisp. Disciplined, not corporate rent cops. These were trained killers. Rourke ducked behind a lab table, firing 2 quick shots that dropped the first man in the doorway. These guys aren't here to arrest us. Michael moved in sync with Sophie, their training, his military past, her shadowy background, turning the chaos into calculated rhythm. He dropped to one knee, squeezing off controlled bursts, while Sophie advanced low, her sidearm barking twice for every guard she sighted. A bullet ricocheted off the glass wall of the prototype's lab, spiderwebbing the pane. Michael's heart spiked. One wrong hit and the device could be destroyed, or worse. Watch the cylinder, he shouted over the gunfire. 2 guards flanked from the left. Michael caught the movement, sliding behind a steel support pillar. One came around first. Michael slammed the butt of his rifle into the man's throat, yanked his weapon free, and sent him to the floor. Sophie took the second with a clean headshot before he could react. Rourke yelled from across the chamber. We've got more incoming. Another wave was already advancing down the far hallway, their boots thundering against the metal floor. Sophie reloaded fast. We can't hold this room forever. Michael's eyes flicked to the prototype, still sitting under glass, the lab tech frozen inside. We're not leaving without it. He motioned to Rourke. Get me inside that lab. Now Rourke dashed to the console by the glass wall, his fingers flying across the keys. I can crack it in 90 seconds. He didn't finish. A bullet shattered the console, sparks spraying across the floor. Michael cursed under his breath. 90 seconds was a luxury they didn't have. Sophie's eyes darted to an emergency control panel on the wall, half hidden behind a fallen guard. We don't need the console. We just need a distraction. Michael's lips curled into a dangerous smile. Then let's give Kane a show he'll never forget. 2. Sophie didn't wait for permission. She dove for the fallen guard, yanked open the panel, and twisted the heavy red lever inside. A sharp hiss filled the chamber, followed by a deep rumble under their feet. "Oh, what did you just do?" Rourke shouted, still firing from behind cover. Before Sophie could answer, the fire suppression system exploded to life, not water, but dense gray smoke flooding from ceiling vents. Within seconds, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The air turned heavy, muffling every sound except the pounding of boots and muffled shouts from the guards. Michael's instincts kicked in. Low stance, slow breathing, ears open. He could hear them, moving, coughing, struggling to adjust.
"Sophie, on me!"
he called. Her shadow materialized at his left, and together they slipped toward the glass-walled lab where the prototype waited. The lab tech inside was panicking, fumbling with his hazmat helmet as the smoke crept in. Michael slammed the butt of his rifle against the reinforced glass. It didn't even crack. Sophie's gaze darted to the metal latch mechanism near the base. "It's magnetic," she said. "We can override it with a power cut." Michael scanned the wall until he spotted an auxiliary breaker box just outside the lab. 2 controlled shots. The casing shattered, wires sparking. The magnetic lock gave a sharp click. Sophie yanked the door open. The tech bolted for the exit, but Michael grabbed him by the collar and shoved him back inside. "We're taking the case." The man froze, then stepped aside, his eyes darting nervously between them and the chaos outside. Michael lifted the prototype, heavier than it looked, and slung it under one arm. "Got it. Let's move." They pushed back into the smoke-filled chamber, navigating by memory and instinct. Somewhere above, Kane's voice boomed over the PA again. "You think you're winning, Michael? This is just the first layer of the game." A burst of gunfire tore past them, one round grazing Sophie's sleeve. Rourke appeared out of the haze, his eyes wide. "We've got a clean shot to the west exit. But it won't stay clean for long." Michael gave a single nod. "Then we run. And we don't stop until we're out." Through the gray fog, the 3 of them sprinted toward the far corridor, the alarm still screaming, Kane's words echoing in their ears. The west corridor stretched ahead like a steel artery, dim red lights flashing in rhythm with the alarms. Michael gripped the prototype tight against his chest, its weight pulling at his shoulder. Sophie was just ahead, her weapon sweeping every shadow, while Rourke brought up the rear, firing short bursts to keep the pursuing guards at bay. Boots pounded behind them, shouts cutting through the haze. Michael pushed harder, lungs burning, eyes fixed on the faint green glow of the exit sign in the distance. "We're almost there!" Rourke yelled, ducking as a round sparked off the wall above his head. But the moment they rounded the final bend, Michael's gut sank. The exit was sealed, a heavy blast door locked tight, its control panel flashing EMR Gen CY Located W. And between them and that door stood 2 more guards in full tactical armor, shotguns at the ready. "Down!" Michael barked. He dove sideways just as both guards fired, the concussive blasts shredding the wall panels where they'd been standing seconds before. Sophie returned fire. One shot punching through the first guard's visor, and dropping him instantly. The second guard lunged forward, swinging the butt of his shotgun at Michael's head. Michael blocked with his forearm, the impact rattling his bones, then drove a knee into the man's midsection. As the guard doubled over, Sophie put him down with a precise shot to the chest. The blast door loomed over them now, the control panel sparking. Rourke rushed forward, prying off the cover. "I can override it, but it'll take." The sharp hiss of hydraulics cut him off. From a side hatch, a massive steel net shot across the corridor, slamming into them like a wave. Michael hit the ground hard, the prototype still cradled in his arms as the mesh tightened. Above them, slow, deliberate footsteps approached. The smoke cleared just enough for Michael to see a figure step into the light. Charles Kane himself, flanked by 2 heavily armed enforcers. "Running so soon," Kane said, his voice calm, almost amused. "You've taken something that belongs to me. And now, you've come exactly where I wanted you." Michael's chest heaved, the net biting into his arms. Sophie met his gaze, not panic, but calculation. She was already scanning for a weakness, a way out. Kane crouched beside them, his eyes locking on the prototype. Do you have any idea what you're holding? It's not just a weapon, it's a lever. And I'm about to use it to move the entire world. Kane's men dragged Michael, Sophie, and Rourke down a narrow, dimly lit corridor, the steel net now replaced with heavy restraints that bit into their wrists. The prototype had been ripped from Michael's arms and now rested in Kane's grip like a trophy. The deeper they went, the stranger the air felt. Warmer, charged, almost humming. They reached a massive door guarded by biometric scanners on both sides. Kane placed his palm on one, and with a low mechanical groan, the door split open. Inside was a cavernous chamber unlike anything Michael had ever seen. At its center stood a towering, spherical structure suspended by thick cables, pulsating with pale blue light. Monitors lined the walls, streaming incomprehensible data. Engineers in black uniforms moved like ghosts between workstations, their eyes fixed on the glowing core. This, Kane said, spreading his arms, is the Nexus engine. The most advanced computational weapon in existence. It can shut down any infrastructure on the planet, cripple economies, redirect entire defense systems with a single command. Michael's jaw tightened. You're insane. You'd throw the whole world into chaos. Kane's smile didn't falter. Chaos is merely opportunity others are too weak to seize. He walked toward the Nexus, cradling the prototype. This piece you tried to steal is the final component. Once installed, the engine's reach will be absolute. Every bank account, every communication line, every power grid, all in my control. Sophie stepped forward despite the guard's grip. Why? You already have more money and power than most countries. Kane glanced over his shoulder. Because countries crumble. Empires fall. But systems can be rebuilt in your image. Michael scanned the room quickly. 2 guards at the only exit, a raised catwalk above with more armed men, engineers oblivious to anything but their screens. No easy way out. Kane placed the prototype into a docking port at the Nexus's base. The hum deepened. The blue light intensifying until it bathed the chamber in an eerie glow. A low vibration ran through the floor, as if the building itself had taken a breath. Rourke leaned toward Michael, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. If that thing goes live, we're done. Everyone's done. Michael's eyes narrowed. Then we stop it before it does. Kane turned back toward them, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. You're going to watch history bend. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. The Nexus's glow pulsed faster now, casting long, flickering shadows across the chamber. The hum had shifted into a deep, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat amplified through the walls. Engineers typed in rapid sequences, screens filling with streams of encrypted commands. Kane stood at the central console, his eyes locked on a series of progress bars creeping upward. System integration 20%, 13%. Michael's pulse raced. He could feel time slipping away in those numbers. Every percentage point meant Kane's control over the world was tightening. He leaned subtly toward Sophie, speaking without moving his lips. The cables, the ones feeding into the core. If we can disrupt them. Sophie's gaze followed his. 4 thick conduits ran from the spherical structure into the walls, each shielded in heavy plating. Would need a power overload, she whispered back. Something to make the Nexus shut itself down before Kane notices. Rourke, still held between 2 guards, caught their eyes. His lips curved into the faintest smirk. I can get you one. Michael knew what that meant. Rourke had explosives. Probably just enough to fry a few key systems. But planting them here, in front of armed men and Kane himself, would be suicide if not perfectly timed. One of the engineers called out, integration at 20%. Power load stable. Kane didn't turn around. Increase throughput. I want full sync in under 20 minutes. Sophie glanced at the catwalk above. A technician was moving along it, checking gauges. If she could get up there, she'd have access to a junction hub. The perfect spot to plant Rourke's charge. But the stairs to the catwalk were guarded. Michael's mind clicked into gear. They needed a distraction big enough to pull those guards away for just a few seconds. Without warning, he stumbled forward, faking a collapse. The guard beside him cursed and tried to haul him up. But Michael kicked backward hard, knocking the man's legs out from under him. The scuffle drew every eye in the room for just an instant. Long enough for Sophie to slip toward the stairs, her step silent. Rourke shifted in his captor's grip, slipping a small, palm-sized detonator from his sleeve and flicking it toward her. She caught it mid-stride, her hand closing around it as she climbed. Michael was slammed against the floor, a boot on his back. Kane didn't even glance over. "If you break him, I'll find another witness," he said flatly. "He's only here to watch." From above, Sophie reached the junction hub. She pried open the panel. Wires spilling out in a nest of color and sparks. She set the charge deep inside, glancing down at Michael. The look they exchanged said everything. "Once this goes off, we run." Integration 29%, 30%. Sophie's finger hovered over the detonator's safety switch. Michael drew a slow breath. The countdown had already begun. But whose would end first? The hum inside the chamber rose into a deafening roar. The Nexus engine's glow swelling to a blinding brilliance. Integration 39%, 40%. Sophie's hand tightened on the detonator. Michael gave the faintest nod. She flicked the safety off and pressed the trigger. The world shattered in light and sound. A blinding flash erupted from the junction hub, followed by a violent boom that ripped through the chamber. The catwalk buckled, metal screaming as it collapsed. Engineers dove for cover, alarms blaring in every corner. Smoke and sparks filled the air, the Nexus flickering wildly like a dying star. Michael seized the moment. He slammed his shoulder into the guard's legs, sending the man sprawling, then tore the restraint from his own wrists. Rourke headbutted his captor, yanking the man's sidearm freed. "Mova!" Michael shouted, grabbing Sophie as she leapt down from the wrecked catwalk. Kane roared over the chaos. But the explosion had thrown the room into pandemonium, men shouting, systems failing. Power conduits bursting in showers of sparks. Michael spotted a side maintenance hatch half, hidden behind a tangle of pipes. "There!" he yelled, pulling Sophie toward it while Rourke laid down covering fire. Bullets ricocheted off steel, each one sounding far too close. They ducked into the hatch, sprinting through a narrow service tunnel lit only by flickering emergency lights. Behind them, the deep mechanical heartbeat of the Nexus faltered, stuttered and died. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. When they finally burst into the cold night air on the far side of the complex, Michael stopped only long enough to catch his breath. Sophie clutched the burnt, cracked remains of the prototype. "We destroyed the engine," she said, her voice trembling, "but Kane's still out there." Michael nodded grimly. "Then this isn't over. But tonight, we kept the world breathing." In the distance, the complex glowed red with fire, sirens wailing. Somewhere inside, Kane was already plotting his next move. Michael glanced at Sophie, at Rourke, and felt something he hadn't in a long time. Resolve. "We end this. For good." They disappeared into the night, the smoke behind them twisting into the sky like a warning. You enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next one. If you've experienced something similar, feel free to share it in the comments.
Thank you for your valuable time.